That night, Los Angeles felt hotter than usual. The wind carried smoke and the sharp, burning scent. In one corner of the city, flames raged, devouring high-rise buildings and commercial storefronts. This was no ordinary fire. Within hours, the flames had consumed several blocks and threatened everything in their path. James, a 35-year-old firefighter, was used to situations like this. After more than 10 years of service, he had witnessed many large fires, but tonight felt different. The air smelled so heavy, as though there was something more than just fire consuming the world around them. The sprinkler system has completely failed. We need to move fast. Captain Rivera shouted, breaking the noise from the radio in James's hand. The entire team moved quickly, rushing into the burning building, fighting the ever-growing flames. James took a deep breath, trying to calm his mind. This was his job, fighting fire, fighting fate, saving lives. But tonight, there was a different kind of tension in the air. They entered the nearly collapsed building through a back door that was wide open. Flames were everywhere, and the temperature inside could suffocate anyone. James moved cautiously, his eyes scanning every corner of the dark, smoke-filled room. With the fire extinguisher in his hand, he continued to fight the increasingly uncontrolled blaze. The entire team worked with great focus, but James knew this wasn't just about fire. There was a strange feeling that kept troubling him. When they reached a main room, James paused for a moment, sensing something different. There was a flash of light amidst the thick smoke that made his eyes squint. His mind wondered if it was just the reflection of the burning fire, or if it was something more. However, as he looked more closely, his eyes widened. In the middle of the flames that continued to burn and destroy, an object lay on the floor. The object stood in stark contrast to everything around it, untouched, unburned by the fire. James stared at it with a great deal of curiosity. He stepped forward carefully, against the increasingly oppressive heat. It was a book. A thick tome with a cover that appeared very old, yet well preserved. Without hesitation, James bent down and picked up the book. There was something very strange about it. As an experienced firefighter, James knew that almost nothing could survive in such intense flames. Everything would be destroyed, burned to nothing. But this book was different. When he opened the cover, he saw writing on the first page. Arabic text he had never seen before, though he felt strangely familiar with the shape of the letters. But as he held the book longer, there was a vibration that felt different. For some reason, in the middle of the panic and chaos, James felt as though something was pulling at him. Something bigger than just the fire he was fighting. "James! We have to get out now," shouted his colleague, Mark, who came running toward him. James snapped out of his daze. The fire was getting closer. However, with the book in his hands, for some reason, James didn't want to leave it behind. In those tense moments, he felt as though there was something important he needed to do with the book. Quickly, James ran out of the building, which was on the brink of collapse. Once outside, he felt the cool night air on his face. Something about the Quran still intact in his hands made the world around him feel calmer, even though the fire was still raging in the distance. The rest of the team had already lined up, waiting for further instructions. "James, why are you carrying that book?" Captain Rivera asked, surprised. James looked at the Quran in his hands, still confused. He didn't know what made him keep holding the book, but there was a strong pull within him not to let it fall to the ground. I don't know. But this isn't normal, Captain, James replied in a low voice. Captain Rivera shook his head, but James could see the confusion in his eyes. They all knew this fire was unlike any they had ever dealt with. That night, James couldn't sleep. In his dark bedroom, the Quran lay beside his bed. He kept staring at it, feeling an odd compulsion inside him. What made this book remain untouched amidst such ferocious flames? Was it just a coincidence? Or was there something greater waiting for him? With a growing sense of curiosity, James knew one thing for sure: the ordinary life he had been living was changed forever. A new journey, a journey involving this book, was about to begin. But, was he ready to face what was to come? That morning, James woke up with a heavy head and a heart full of questions. The Quran, found in the midst of the raging fire, haunted his thoughts throughout the night. He could feel it in every beat of his heart, like a call he could not ignore. Instead of feeling relief after completing his duty, there was an unease that kept bothering him. After showering and having a light breakfast, he sat at the kitchen table and stared at the book that still lay there. Though it looked simple, the book held a power he couldn't explain. James felt as if it wasn't just a physical object, but more like a message, something he had to understand. "What am I really feeling?" he thought to himself, his eyes fixed on the Arabic writing etched on the first page. He tried to recall if there had ever been a time before when he had seen writing like that. But nothing really made sense. The Quran felt like a puzzle that needed to be solved. When it was time to go to work, James reluctantly left his home. Yet, the thoughts of the book continued to haunt him. After working all day, even amidst the chaos of the fire and the heavy tasks that needed to be completed, his mind couldn't let go of the book. He knew there had to be an explanation, and he knew that to find the answer, he had to dig deeper. After finishing work that evening, James returned home and went straight to the table. The book was still there, as if waiting to be opened and understood further. James stared at it for a moment before finally opening it, page by page. With each page he turned, more ignorance haunted him. James didn't know Arabic, so every word printed on the pages seemed like disconnected images. However, there was something intriguing, an inner feeling that told him there was something incredibly important behind every line of text. There was a kind of calm that washed over him when he looked at it. With strong determination, James decided to learn more. He opened his laptop and started searching for information about the Quran and Islam. He knew that in order to understand this book, he had to understand its context, who wrote it, what it meant, and how the Quran could remain intact in the midst of a fire that consumed everything. James began watching videos of lectures on Islam and the Quran. He also read various articles about the history of Islam, about how the Quran was considered a revelation from God to the Prophet Muhammad, PBUH. The deeper he read, the more fascinated he became by the teachings contained within it. There were so many things he had never known, about life, about patience, about how a Muslim lives a life full of peace and hope. Beyond the knowledge he was accumulating, there was one thing that continued to echo within him, the sense of peace that came each time he tried to understand the book. Unlike many other topics he had studied, Islam offered an inner peace he had never experienced before. All the lectures, articles, and videos he watched taught him about tranquility in the face of life's trials, about entrusting everything to God, and about seeking light even when the world seemed dark. As time went on, James's desire to learn grew stronger. The more he learned, the more he felt a deeper connection within himself, a connection that transcended logic and rational explanation. One evening, after spending weeks studying Islam, James felt that something greater was drawing him in. As he read about the concept of Tawhid, the belief that there is only one Almighty God, he felt an immense sense of greatness. There was a feeling that words could not explain, a sense that his life had been guided toward something more important than he had ever imagined. "This isn't just about a book," James muttered, his eyes fixed on the Quran on the table. "It's more than that. I'm searching for something greater." On that quiet night, James felt his heart filled with a new hope. A sense that life, though full of challenges, could be full of meaning and peace. Yet, he also realized that his journey had only just begun. After spending days reflecting and seeking answers, James decided to speak with someone who might give him more insight, a longtime friend who had embraced Islam. This friend, Abdullah, had long invited James to learn more about the faith he followed, but James had always declined, citing a lack of understanding. On a quiet evening, James sent a message to Abdullah. "Abdullah, can we talk? I want to know more about Islam." Not long after, he received a reply. "Of course, James. I'm so glad you're interested. We can meet any time." That marked the beginning of a spiritual journey that would not only change James's life, but also lead him to a discovery far greater than himself. With careful steps and a desire to seek the truth, James knew that his life was about to enter a new chapter full of hope and enlightenment. The day James had been waiting for finally arrived. After weeks filled with questions and seeking, he felt ready to delve deeper into what he had learned. His longtime friend, Abdullah, had agreed to meet him at a small mosque on the outskirts of Los Angeles that Abdullah often visited. James didn't know what he would find there, but the curiosity within him was growing stronger. The mosque looked simple, yet there was a sense of peace radiating from the building. James felt a different atmosphere as soon as he entered the mosque grounds. The cool night air felt so soothing, as if each step he took brought peace within him. He saw Abdullah standing in front of the mosque door, smiling and waving. "Assalamu alaikum, James," Abdullah greeted warmly, offering a brief hug. "Welcome." "Wa alaikum assalam," James replied, a little nervous, even though he had known Abdullah for a long time. But tonight, everything felt different. He felt as though he was on the verge of a significant change in his life. They sat in the quiet room of the mosque. Abdullah began the conversation with a simple question: "So, what made you interested in learning more about Islam?" James looked at his friend for a moment, trying to find the right words. It started with a fire. I found a book, the Quran, amidst such a big blaze. I don't know why, but at that moment, I felt like there was something connecting me to that book. I started learning more about Islam, and I felt there was something big, something true, that I had been searching for all this time. Abdullah listened attentively, then said gently, "That's how Allah shows His way, James. Sometimes, He gives guidance in ways we don't expect. The Quran is a guide for life, not just for Muslims, but for all of humanity." James looked at Abdullah, his eyes beginning to fill with deeper curiosity. "I've read a lot about Islam. I feel peaceful every time I learn about it. But I'm also scared. Scared that I won't be able to live as a Muslim, scared that I might be wrong." Abdullah smiled and said with understanding, "Islam is about the journey, not perfection. No one is perfect, but if your intention is sincere in seeking the truth and following His path, Allah will guide you. And believe me, every small step you take towards Him will bring peace into your life." After a moment of reflection, James finally asked the question that had long been buried in his heart. "What exactly does the Sharia mean? What do I need to do to become a Muslim?" Abdullah nodded, then explained patiently, "The Sharia is the declaration that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is His messenger. It's the first and most important statement of faith in Islam. When you say it sincerely, it means you acknowledge that Allah is the only God worthy of worship, and that Prophet Muhammad is His final messenger." James listened carefully, Abdullah's words resonating deeply in his heart. Suddenly, a sense of calm enveloped him. He felt his heart open, as though something was filling the emptiness he had long felt. A moment of clarity came so naturally, so clearly, and so distinctly. "Abdullah," James said with conviction in his voice, "I want to say the Sharia. I feel that this is the path I must choose, and I want to start this journey." Abdullah looked at him with great joy. "Alhamdulillah, James. That is an incredible decision. Let's do it now." They stood, and Abdullah led James in reciting the two testimonies of faith. With a firm and confident voice, James said, "Asihadu alla ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu, wa asihadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu." Suddenly, it felt as though the world had paused for a moment. James felt something flowing through him, like a light piercing through the darkness. A deep sense of peace washed over him, peace he had never felt before. It was a feeling of certainty, as if he had found the place he had been searching for all along, even without realizing it. Abdullah smiled, his eyes filled with happiness. "Welcome, James, to the path full of blessings." James felt a profound transformation within him. For years, he had been searching for peace, but now, for the first time, he felt that he had found the right place. Islam not only answered many of his life's questions, but also gave him a peace he had never known before. On that blessed night, in the simple mosque, James felt as though the entire world had become brighter. He knew that, although his journey had just begun, he had found something immensely valuable, something that would change his life forever. The next day, news of James's spiritual journey spread quickly. His friends who heard his story were inspired. Many were moved by how James had found Islam after the extraordinary event in the midst of the fire. The Quran, which had remained intact amidst the flames, had silently borne witness to this incredible spiritual journey. James knew that, although the world could be filled with doubt and confusion, he now had a clear direction, one that would bring peace, truth, and light into his life. And his first step had been taken with the sincere Shahada, a declaration that would continue to illuminate his life's journey.